we are going to have more systems, more weather events, more earthquakes. So it means that we have to prepare the country.
And being prepared is a must, because Monday was a traumatic day for most of us. I hope we're reflecting on the right ways to respond to an earthquake. As the experts warn, there will be more.
The country has the appetite now for information. And I think we can't lose sight of having the information.
I hope you're doing much better today. I'm Adrian Atkinson, and this is Jamaica Magazine. On the show today, we look at measures in place by the government to finance natural disasters and share outcomes of the National Disaster Risk Management Committee's meeting on the aftermath of the 5.6 magnitude earthquake. Stay with us. The news of the day is after this next message.
Time they reach the next part, I show they cut it. Talking about that, listen to this. Pen sends a message. Disaster do happens. Be prepared. The municipal corporation reminds us of hurricane, earthquake, flooding, you name it, and preparedness.
Mommy, we really have to take this thing seriously.
Mommy, where's the emergency shelters?
Samir.
Primary school, churches, community centers. Know your nearest emergency shelter. Protect your family during any natural disaster. Be prepared. Visit the ODPEM website at odpem.org.jm to find the shelter listing for your parish. Know your emergency shelters.
Good day, I'm Lisa Rowe, and this is your JIS News for Thursday, November 2, 2023. The Bureau of Standards Jamaica, BSJ, is revising the country's building codes through government funding of $100 million. The BSJ is also receiving funding from the Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, to update the codes. Director of Standards at the BSJ, Julia Bonner-Duet, gave an update as she addressed this week's meeting of the National Disaster Risk Management Council.
So we have 11 codes being updated, and they're in 10 subject areas. The 11 codes handle areas such as, for new buildings, they have a building code for new buildings, large buildings. They have one for the existing buildings that are not necessarily up to code, and you have one for small buildings and residential buildings. And in Jamaica, we are unique for small buildings because we make small buildings with slab roofs, and we continue to do that.
The codes are referenced in the Building Act, and the Ministry of Local Government is responsible for monitoring the implementation of the codes.
The Bureau is also working with PIOJ, as I said before, JSIF, Jamaica Fire Brigade, Social Development Commission, and others to ensure that the codes are properly implemented and effective.
The BSJ is now conducting training with different stakeholders on the provisions of the building codes. Training on the Jamaica Fire Code started on Monday with personnel from the University of Technology and the International Code Council, ICC. Mrs. Bonner-Duet says the limited damage reported from Monday's earthquake is evidence that Jamaica's building standards stand up well in a natural disaster.
I think generally speaking, across the world, persons kept on calling what is the ill effect of this earthquake, and Jamaica stood strong.
As the post-earthquake assessment continues, local government minister Desmond McKenzie is commending the National Emergency Center and Disaster Risk Management Council for their responses during and after the event. The minister commended the teams during Tuesday's sitting of the House of Representatives. He says the rapid response system to deal with disasters were operational within 30 minutes of the earthquake.
This rivals the best international practice for immediate disaster assessment and emergency response. And I say this against the backdrop that this event has served as an important test of our response capabilities. And it was proven, Mr. Speaker, that the system works and that the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management is on top of its game.
The minister says assessment of the national infrastructure so far is limited, but points to most of the services provided by various agencies now being operational.
Minor damage to the National Water Commission. Customers are still being provided with portable water. The Jamaica Public Service Company is back in full force. The services that are provided by the two major telecom companies had some struggles. They are fully back. We have seen activities being returned to our hospitals and health centers, and the services are still being provided both for inpatient and outpatient services.
The Ministry of Agriculture will be increasing support for vegetable farmers who have been facing losses due to different climatic and weather conditions. Portfolio Minister Floyd Green says the farmers have been suffering tremendous declines in the production of vegetables due to the drought suffered for much of the year, elevated heat, and more recently, intense bouts of rainfall.
So we have seen losses over the last month in parts of Portland, in parts of St. Thomas. Unfortunately, some of our vegetable belt in northern Clarendon.
Minister Green was addressing Wednesday's post-cabinet press briefing at Jamaica House. The Meteorological Service has advised that a broad trough, currently located across the central Caribbean, is producing a large area of cloudiness with showers and thunderstorms and is expected to linger across the region through to Friday. The authorities have warned that likely soil saturation due to persistent rainfall across eastern parishes and St. Catherine over the past few days may mean flash flooding and possible landslides with additional rainfall. Minister Green says his ministry is keeping a close watch on the weather systems.
The continued rainfall with the saturated soil doesn't augur well for farmers, especially in eastern Jamaica. So we're going to put additional support to those vegetable farmers to help them bounce back, especially as we look towards the Christmas.
Meanwhile, small farmers have been assisted in reaching over $1 billion in sales through government's Agri-Linkages Exchange ALEX platform. The ALEX platform is a collaborative initiative between the Tourism Enhancement Fund and the Rural Agricultural Development Authority, RADA. It connects small farmers with hotels and restaurants across the island to expand their market avenues. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett says this milestone of $1 billion in sales reflects the impact of the tourism value chain on small businesses. He gave the update during the ministry's annual strategic planning retreat held recently at the Montego Bay Convention Center. The minister also revealed that tourism loan disbursements through the National Export-Import Exim Bank have surpassed $1 billion for 2023. And finally, 3 major activities have been planned for this year's local observance of World Town Planning Day on November 8. The National Environment and Planning Agency, NEPA, is leading Jamaica's observance. Activities include a church service slated for the Portmore New Testament Church of God in Bayside on Sunday, November 5. A symposium will be hosted at the National Housing Trust Overtime Facility in New Kingston with keynote speaker Prime Minister Andrew Holness. And a 10-day school tour began on November 1.
We are proud that we are engaging the students at this level because of the importance of urban and regional planning to Jamaica.
NEPA's senior manager of the Spatial Planning Division gave the update during a recent JIS think tank session. Recognition of World Town Planning Day started officially in 1949, and Jamaica began commemorating it in 2001. It is being observed this year under the theme Building Resilient Communities and Cities Through Smart Solutions. And that's it for JIS News Today. I'm Lisa Rowe. Thanks for watching.
Proactive measures by the government have put the country in a good position to access financing in the event of a natural disaster. One such instrument is the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund. And what better time to remind the nation of this on Finance Matters?
Jamaica is prone to natural disasters such as hurricanes and earthquakes. Did you know in 1988, Hurricane Gilbert blew the roofs off 80% of the country's houses and wrecked the economy? Now in 2023, the government has learned from past experiences and will implement a National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund to assist the country financially in the event of a natural disaster. But how does it work? Hi, I'm Shaquille Rochester Shorter and welcome to Finance Matters. Today, I will be speaking with Mr. Taron Francis, Chief Fiscal Economist in the Economic Management Division at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service about the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow the Ministry of Finance on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and now TikTok to see all the episodes and highlights. Mr. Francis, thank you for coming on our program.
Thank you for having me, Shaquille.
What is the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund?
Okay, so the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund is actually an account to be established that will house resources to deal with losses associated with natural disasters.
Okay.
That will enable the government to respond quickly and effectively in the aftermath of a natural disaster.
So, Mr. Francis, when will this fund become accessible?
Okay, so the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, we're aiming to have the relevant amendment to the Financial Administration and Audit Act submitted to Parliament by the end of December 2023. At that time as well, we are aiming to have the financial regulations that will govern the transaction relating to the fund finalized and approved. So we expect that the fund should become operationalized sometime after the end of December 2023.
That's good news. So, Mr. Francis, in the event of an emergency, a devastating disaster, how quickly will we be able to access this fund?
All right, so we know that it is important to be able to mobilize funds as quickly as possible after you have had a natural disaster event that would have resulted in significant losses.
Yes.
And so the fund is expected to, the monies from the fund are expected to be disbursed within very short period of time. Now, the reserve fund, one of the proposals is that the fund should be accessed only if the natural disaster would have impacted the country with damages exceeding 1.5% of GDP. And so what it will require is the fiscal commissioner to ascertain the impact of the disaster. And then once that has been concluded, the process to get the funds from the account will begin. And that process is expected to go pretty quickly. It will take the same process as would a normal warrant. So the Public Expenditure Division would issue a warrant. Auditor General would do their audit. The various ministries and departments would put in their request for the monies to be expended, and then Auditor General will have the money disbursed to the accounts for the spending to take place. So that process is expected to be short within say 10 to 15 days or less.
But some would say that's not really short, 10 to 15 days after a disaster?
The fact is that it will take a little while for the assessment of the impact.
Okay.
So that is going to be what is likely to consume most of the time prior to the disbursement of the fund. But no doubt, the funds are going to be disbursed in relatively short time.
So how prepared would you say we are with this fund now?
We are much better prepared than we would have been certainly a decade ago, 5 years ago. This fund is expected to be capitalized from the national budget up to $10 billion. But not only will it hold monies capitalized from the budget, the fund is proposed to also house those payments that would have been remitted from the other policies that we currently have for disaster risk financing. So when the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility pays out with a triggering event, those funds are expected to be paid into the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund. We're talking about the catastrophe bond. If a payment is made, then it will also go to that account. So we are much better prepared, I'd say, relative to where we would have been a few years ago.
So to be clear, the NNDRF is different from the catastrophe bond?
It is different. So the catastrophe bond is an instrument that would have been issued in the international capital market that allow us to draw down up to US $185 million. In the event of a triggering event, the monies are paid out and are utilized to finance response and reconstructive activities. Reconstruction activities, in terms of the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund. As I said, first it will be capitalized by monies to be allocated from the budget, and then where payments are made based on the current instruments that we have available, those will also go into the Disaster Reserve Fund. So there are two separate instruments, except that one of them, when it pays out, it will be held in the account of the National Disaster Reserve Fund.
Now I get you, Mr. Francis. So before we go, quickly, tell us 3 things that we need to remember about the NNDRF.
Okay, so the first thing I want us to remember is that the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund is just one of a number of instruments that we have in terms of disaster risk financing. So we have the Natural Disaster Fund, we have the catastrophe bond, we have the contingent credit facility with the IDB, we have risk policies with the insurance policies with the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. So it is just one of the instruments that we have in our suite of instruments for disaster risk financing. The second thing is that the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund will be capitalized from the budget in addition to holding resources that are made available when a triggering event would have resulted in a payout from one of the other instruments that we have available. And the last thing I'd want to say is the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund is certainly putting Jamaica in a better position to be able to respond quickly and effectively to natural disasters when they do occur.
I'm happy to hear that, Mr. Francis. On that note, thank you for being on our program today.
It was a pleasure to be here.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of Finance Matters. Remember to follow us on social media at MOF Jamaica and tune in next week as we continue to demystify the economic and fiscal policies and initiatives implemented by the government to empower Jamaicans as we chart a path to Jamaica's economic prosperity.
Motorists, please look out for us when we're crossing the road.
While we early in the year speak about earthquake preparedness, it has to now become a feature of a daily occurrence in terms of how we message to the country as it relates to earthquake.
Information coming out of the National Disaster Risk Management Committee's meeting on Tuesday. We have some high points from a few key stakeholders.
Something that we always have to bear in mind, that if there is a strong enough earthquake, there is likely to be tsunami activity that could affect us in Jamaica.
Our risk for tsunami is maybe a bit misunderstood. What we are mainly concerned as a local scientific community would be that when you have a large earthquake, it might cause submarine landslides. This is like in areas in the marine zones, which might have, the slope itself might be very steep, and you might get collapse of certain sections there. And that might create localized sort of tsunamis. So this is what we look out for, because this is what we would have seen 1692, 1907, right? So it's important that we keep that in mind. But the large risk of tsunami from a local earthquake, the earthquakes would not, based on the fault length and other parameters, would not generate that level of energy to create this widespread tsunami as we think.
There's a certain level of indiscipline that exists among some people in the motoring public. That is our real concern. The free movement of emergency vehicles is something that the council needs to sit, have a look at, putting the major players in the committee at the table to look at how we can address this problem. The reality is that we are going to have more systems, more weather events, more earthquakes. So it means that we have to prepare the country. And I am going to be meeting with the ADPEM team to look at how we're going to strengthen the message right across the country in the various areas. And I think this has to be a starting point where we go into communities.
We have given a commitment based on what has happened in terms of having a very deep dive in terms of our national earthquake plan, in terms of the revision of the national earthquake plan that we'll be looking at, and the significant work that we have to put in terms of our national earthquake process. Outside of the work that we are doing as state entity in terms of our preparedness measures, we also have to ensure that we continue to educate our public and ensure that the thing is drills, and it becomes, persons always say second nature, but I say if it becomes second nature, it means you have to think about it. It becomes nature. That is a part of you.
For water supply systems all over, there is a degree of vulnerability to issues relating to earthquakes, but thankfully there's been no significant damage or impact that has been sustained by the National Water Commission's systems. We have some 1,000 plus structures, facilities located all across the island, some in very remote locations, which would have been affected by the shaking. We also have particular water supply tanks and reservoirs which are at risk. Thankfully, all our assessment to date, and we are continuing to do assessments, show that there is no significant or no noticeable impact, particularly on the Mona Reservoir, nor are we seeing any noticeable impact on the 19 miles of pipeline coming from the Yalas and Negro Rivers in St. Thomas. The Hermitage Dam remains intact, and there is no noticed damage sustained by that. Similarly, at our other smaller tanks and reservoirs across the country. We expect that there will be some minimal effect from issues relating to pipeline breaks, which is natural after an event such as what happened. But those are likely to be manifested in days to come. Since with underground pipelines, it will take a little while for any break to be recognized. We are planning to put ourselves in the best position to be able to respond to any increase in the number of leak responses that we'll need to do. And we'll continue during the course of the next few days to make sure we complete our detailed assessment and response.
Jamaica, I can help you protect our citizens.
Jamaica Eye will play a part in increasing your public safety.
Jamaica Eye is part of an island-wide network of camera surveillance systems designed to increase the safety of you, our citizens. If you have a camera system outside your home or office facing a public space, log on to jamaicai.gov.jm today. Jamaica Eye, we're all connected. The Ministry of National Security, creating a safer and prosperous Jamaica.
The Pan American Health Organization has reported that over the last 7 months, there have been over 2 million cases of dengue and over 700 cases of dengue-related death in Latin America and the Caribbean region. Jamaica continues to see an increase in the number of cases. Dengue is a preventable disease. Every effort must be made to stop the mosquito that cause dengue from breeding and from biting. At least once per week, search and destroy mosquito breeding sites around your homes, schools, workplace, and communities. Use mosquito repellent that contains DEET. Open your windows and doors during fogging. Let's work together to prevent dengue.
We've come to the end of our show for today. Do join us again tomorrow when we'll bring another informative program. In the meantime, stay connected via our website, jis.gov.jm. And while you're online, send your feedback to Jamaica Magazine@jis.gov.jm or via tweet @JIS News. You may also find us on all the major social media platforms and through our mobile app that's Android and iOS compatible. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Adrian Atkinson. Do take care.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.